Hi, I'm Suresh Venkat. You're watching Digital Disruptors. I'm in conversation with Brian Solis, author and digital analyst. Brian, let's talk about quantum computing. To
Okay.
start with, what is quantum computing?
Quantum computing represents an entirely new paradigm of computing. So whereas today we have classical or supercomputing that are based on largely, just to simplify it, say ones and zeros, bits that are basically, this or that, and we use that to compute in a linear process, any series of outcomes. But quantum introduces an entirely new dynamic of processing, which, you have electrons that could coexist in one space. You have objects that could be both waves and particles. And what that means is you have entirely new constructs for which to process qubits instead of just traditional bits, which opens the door wide open to processing potential that I don't even know a lot of us can yet comprehend. And to get there, to be fault tolerant and to geek out a little bit, you need 1 million qubits and a circuitry system, a hardware system that can support that. We're not even at 50 today, so it's a long road ahead. But I think what represents its most greatest potential is that it'll give us the power that we've been working on for maybe 120 years to make quantum a reality, the ability to create opportunities and solve some of the world's biggest problems.
So, what are the key applications for quantum computing? What is envisaged?
I think what we can expect, we're already starting to see hybrid quantum models that are being experimented with in basically every deep vertical application. So you think about pharma and drug discovery or drug innovation and the ability to sort of simulate all of these potential outcomes. You think about insurance and financial models that will be fortified and cyber protected in ways that we can't even think about yet, but that they're already starting to model beyond blockchain, right? Protecting this information against the very technology that could break through that information. You have transportation, you have logistics, you have supply chain, you have customer experience, you have all of these current models that are looking at quantum to go deeper and broader, not just to fix problems, but also to open up new possibilities, new opportunities.
Brian, what is the sort of alignment between quantum computing, artificial intelligence, and machine learning? Will all these three forces come together, or will they exist separately?
When I think about quantum and the algorithms that are even trying to prove that quantum is going to work, because we're not there yet, right? I think eventually they're going to be hyper-focused on solving for issues like, for example, climate change is one of the most talked about scenarios that quantum computing can be applied to, reverse engineering global warming. At some point, I have to imagine the answer is going to be yes. I think by the time, quantum, it's 2020. Quantum is probably 5 years out from being proven as a concept. So we still won't be applying algorithms to solve the world's problems yet. But the reason I say that is because one thing I do want to bring attention to is that we're on the cusp of what we call a cognitive enterprise, which is an AI-powered, machine learning-powered enterprise to look at scenarios, whether that's process enhancements, whether that's pattern recognition, whether that's decision making as a machine versus a human, that is going to create a next generation, a more immediate stage of business, and a more immediate stage of the enterprise. So, for example, you have a company called Era Technology that refers to this as the self-driving enterprise. And the reason I share that is because we're going to see that as a reality in the next year. Like, this is right now stuff. So that means that AI and machine learning are essentially going to be part of every revolution, technology revolution that moves. It's just the new normal.
And you say quantum computing will help us solve problems that we only imagined of solving one day. Will it also create problems of that magnitude?
Some of the early discussions with quantum computing have already been looked at how do we use quantum to start breaking through everything, systems, defenses, security. So I think if we could learn anything from the hacker community is absolutely. With every technology, there's good and bad, right? It all comes down to intent. So that means there has to be more good guys than bad guys, but it's not just about the threats that it represents. I mean, really, we have so much incredible technology today that we're not even using in its full potential. For example, and it's not even technology related, but I mean, just we debate whether or not climate change is real. So I'm more of the optimist that looks at taking these technologies, quantum that far out, but AI, machine learning today, to solve some of these problems and to move forward societally. Right? I think if anything, my hope is that these technologies bring us together.
If I may put on my science fiction writer hat for a moment and say, how far are we away from a Skynet scenario that we saw in Terminator, like a self-aware enterprise? What if we had a self-aware computer or a self-aware computer that runs governance and decides it doesn't like human beings too much?
Well, that's a great question. Ironically, many organizations are hiring science fiction writers as a way of playing out these types of scenarios.
Futurologists and
Yeah, so it's one of the things that I've done in my past is, so I'm a digital analyst, a digital anthropologist, and then also a futurist. And the thing that stitches all of those things together, at least in my work, is the human-centered aspect to that conversation. So answering your question about how far away are we from a Skynet, I can tell you that from a human-centered standpoint, everybody believes that's inevitable, that that's just a natural course of our future. I don't know from a practicality standpoint that should ever be a scenario that's possible. Elon Musk, for example, has quite famously said that leaders need greater ethics in the development of AI. But you know that somewhere around the world, some James Bond villain or some maniacal country leader is looking at ways to use this in their benefit. So I think that what that should inspire is anybody working in information security, cybersecurity, or whatever that next generation of that role is, of using these technologies to sort of thwart that potential of a sentient being coming to life and spinning us all in a direction that favors the machines, because otherwise then the matrix comes to life.
without a kill switch.
Right.
All right, let me end on this note. The average citizen doesn't have much control over these giant forces that are operating in the world between quantum computing and artificial intelligence. What do you and I do? How do you and I cope with this rapidly changing technology world? We have apps, we have phones, we have listening devices. What are sort of some of the good digital habits that we can develop as citizens?
Well, as citizens, we have some of the worst digital habits in existence today. I wrote a book called Lifescale, just came out, and it explores the relationship that technology has had on us as individuals, as professionals, whatever capacity you want to look at it as, but how it's sort of rewired our body, how it's rewired our brains, how it's rewired our biology, how it's rewired our psychology. And I think this is where it gets to really get to the heart of the matter of what you're asking, which is today we're overly intoxicated on the personal technology that we've had, but without realizing the consequences or its effects on our behaviors, our thinking, our creativity, our productivity, our ability to learn, our ability to be in the moment, our ability to feel empathy. These things are absolutely affected by technology, and it requires behaviors and habits that break that first in order to use this in a much more positive light. And the real challenge that we face, and this is the anthropologist in me, is that today's leadership, whether that's parents or mentors or teachers or healthcare professionals or managers or executives in the workplace, they're unfamiliar with the effects of what's happening, behind all of this, and not just individually, but collectively, societally. What we see it, for example, playing out in politics, that when you create algorithms, when you create technologies that put people at the center, and algorithms that reinforce those insular views and insular behaviors, what you get are these subsets of fiefdoms of truth and facts and realities that are not necessarily mutually exclusive. And why that's important is that I think, to answer your question, what we do need is a new generation of leadership, but also technology leadership, to put humanity on a more productive and positive path, because the way it's going today is it's actually breaking us apart.
All right. Last question. Are you a fan of science fiction yourself?
I would like to think that I'm a fan of science fiction. I'm also a geek of just technology in general.
Top one or two tech or science fiction movies or shows that you like watching?
Well, I'll tell you right now, the one that's top of mind is The Matrix, because they're making The Matrix Part 4 in San Francisco, which is where I live right now, and I'm just so excited.
And Elon Musk also said there's a reasonable chance that we are living in a matrix.
There's, there's nothing better than to have a couple glasses of wine and entertain this conversation, because like any good or bad conspiracy theory, whether it's rooted in fact or whether it's just rooted in entertainment value, I mean, there's just fascinating things to see other perspectives in this regard. So, hey, it wouldn't surprise me if it was true, and if it is true, whoever's listening, if you could put me on some better paths in life, I'd appreciate it.
All right, I'd like $1 million as well. All right, Brian Solis, thank you for talking to us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching Digital Disruptors. Stay tuned for more conversations on tech.